We all have that one character, the one from a classic novel or a history book that lived in our heads when we were kids. Now you're a creator and you want to bring them into your world, into your own graphic novel. But there is a massive challenge. How do you reinvent a legend without destroying what made them iconic in the first place? Well, let me show you how I'm using my graphic novel Legends of the West to show you how to enter the mind of a classic character and reinvent them for your story. First rule before you start to create a story with already existing character that someone else created, you have to make sure they're in public domain. So anything wrote before 1929 is in public domain. So, for example, Mark Twain's icons, characters like Huck and Tom Sawyer are public domain. However, if you want to use some characters, for example, Star Wars, you really are a big fan of Darth Vader, and you want to use it in your own story, forget it. You can't. You have to really do your own research and go online and check if these characters that you want to use in your own story that are in public domain, because you want to be free to create whatever you want, to use them without the fear to pay copyrights and royalties. So make sure to do your own research, check if your characters that you want to use that are tied with some copyrights or royalties. Once you find out that the character you want to use in your own story is in the public domain, you're good to go. And you can start to create your own story. But the number one rule, obviously, is if your character that you want to use is a protagonist in a classic novel, obviously you have to read the novel, and not just one time, it's several times, because you have to become almost a psychologist and enter into the mind of the character. In my case, like when I read The Adventure of Tom Sawyer and The Adventure of a Huckleberry Finn, I didn't read it once, not twice, but multiple times. And I had the advantage to read it in two different languages. One in Italian, because I was in Italy when I started to read the novels. I was just a kid. When I moved to United States, I got the original novel and I had to read it in English. And the English that, especially The Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, it is wrote in colloquial English, but it's a colloquial English from that time, from 18 I think Huck Finn was written in 1886, so long time ago. It's very different from the modern English, and I had a pretty difficult time because the southern dialect, it was very strong, and a lot of words I couldn't understand what they were talking about, so I had to read it multiple times even for that reason. However, to understand fully the character, you have to read the story several times and analyze their mind, the character's mind. So you have to become like a psychologist and figure out about why Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer react in certain situation in this way. What are their character's traits? So I figure that Tom is a little bit a manipulator. He's not a bad guy. He's not evil, and he showed it in several times. in the story that he actually cared about Huckleberry Finn, but his traits a little bit dramatic, manipulator, and is very smart. Also, is a dreamer, while Huckleberry Finn is more down to earth, and he tried to survive every day. He went through a lot of pain, loneliness. He hates to be alone, and he finds Tom almost like a brother. So you have to kind of understand their personality. Quick break. This is very important. If you want to read Legends of the West, you can go on my website, one.comics.com, where I post chapters with every page that I've been working on constantly. I keep updating and posting new things. Also, you can even check my blog where I write articles about the comic book industry, art supply, and storytelling. I posted some old artwork, and you can even check my YouTube videos. Don't forget, one.comics.com. Once you understand your character psychology, the first rule of reinventing a character is knowing what cannot change. You have to identify their core DNA. For Tom Sawyer, it's his theatricality. Whether he's a 12-year-old kid or a 16-year-old young man, Tom wants to be the hero. In Legends of the West, he isn't going to California for gold, he's going for the glory, for a new adventure, a new excitement before adulthood. For Huck, it's survival. If you strip away the traits Mark Twain gave them, they aren't the same characters anymore. They are just random people with famous names. This is very important because in so many Hollywood movies or even anime, comic books, a lot of creators reproduce the adventure of Tom Sawyer and the adventure of Huckleberry Finn, and they completely change the characters, even the story. I can tell you that before I even read the two novels, I used to watch an anime back in Italy, and it was called My Friend Huck, and the story, it was funny, it was a good story, and I really enjoyed. And on the credits I saw this story was inspired by the novel of Mark Twain, and I had in my house the book, and I started to read it, and you can't imagine my shock when I read the novel and I said, this is completely different from the anime. It doesn't have nothing to do with the original work. Just an example, Jim, the runaway slave, that together with Huck going along the Mississippi River to looking for his freedom. Jim in the anime, it was just a kid of the same age of Huck and Tom, and he was living with the widow Douglas, and she adopted Jim. So he was just a normal kid of the same age of Huck and Tom, living a nice life and this nice house with the widow who adopted him. I don't think, maybe she didn't adopt him, but taking care of him. And the reason why he went along the Mississippi River with Huck on a raft is because Jim's mother was sick, and she was in the hospital in Cairo, and Jim wanted really to visit his mom, so he went along the Mississippi River, and Huck went with him. So you can imagine that when I read the book, I said, "Oh my God, but this is completely different." And they distort everything, the story, the characters. They kept some traits, but it was completely different. So, and even Disney, they made so many movies about Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and they tried to adapt the story to a very young age, and they distort completely the meaning of the story, the characters, uh, everything that happened. They just use the names and create something completely different. So what's the point to use already existing characters from famous novels to then change completely the persona, the characteristic, and the story, changing completely their background. So I don't like it when they do that, because at this point, just make it your own story with your own original characters. Maybe you can get inspired by the novel, but then don't use the same names and the same characters. Just do something completely different. So I don't understand why they do stuff. I mean, I kind of get it. They want to adapt it to a younger audience, but Mark Twain himself never meant to write these two novels for kids or be part of the school programs. It was just novels that he wrote, basically memoir of childhood. Does it mean to grow up, be a boy in that time, in the West, in Missouri, along by the river. So it was a kind of honor of his boyhood, of that era. So, but because the two characters were two kids, they end up to be part of kids' books, and that's why all these changes. But sometimes we see with other novels and other characters, they use the name, they use the novel, but they make it something completely different. So in Legends of the West, I used them as a teenager, so I'm completely free to do my own story, but at the same time, I keep the same traits that I just grew up and they're going through their teenage years. These principles apply to historical characters too. A perfect example is the anime and manga The Rose of Versailles. The author used real icons like Marie Antoinette and King Louis XVI, placing them in an actual event like the French Revolution. And this is an anime that is really worth to watch, because it's one of the best anime, in my opinion, ever created. It's very old. It's from the 70s. So if you watch it, you see the drawing style, how it's outdated, but I think it's beautiful. And the beauty of this anime, this story, they use real historical characters. They used the good and the bad of their personality, like Marie Antoinette and even the king and all that other characters in around them, all the royalty, and they actually used here a real event like the scandal of the diamond necklace and the fall of Bastille, the beginning of the French Revolution. So, and into all of this, they introduce these new characters, such as Lady Oscar, who is the heroine in the story. And because Oscar was so perfectly molded into the era, she feels real. She feels like these characters almost existed for real. And the author tracked these characters from birth to death through the entire revolution, pre-French Revolution, how things actually start till basically the end. It's a master class in integration, and the author did a really good job. She must have done so much research and studied the French Revolution, all the era, that period, and she did a great job. And I tell you, I don't know how much it's popular in the United States, but in Europe, especially in Italy, I mean, this is a unforgettable anime. I can rewatch it so many times, and it's just so well made. If you wanna use characters that already existed in real life and then introduce your own characters, watch this anime and you can see how well blended everything is. Another tip is shift the power dynamic. To make an old story feel new, flip the original relationship. For example, in the books, Huck followed Tom. Tom was the leader. Huck always looked at Tom like a kid that know much better than him. That he has so much imagination, and he read so many books about all these adventures, pirates, Robin Hood, and Huck didn't know any of these things, and so he followed him in every situation. And even because Huckleberry background, he was the pariah of the small town where they grew up. So, and Tom wasn't rich, but definitely he had a better social status. Also, Tom knew how to read, how to write, because he was going to school, while Huckleberry was basically living on the streets. So this is change in Legends of the West. The power dynamic flip, because Huckleberry is no longer a child living on the streets. He's wealthy as much as Tom, because they found that treasure, all that money back in their hometown. Also, he lives with Tom's relatives, and he has an education. He knows how to read now, writing. He went to school and everything, and he has seen the world cruelty, and so he understands better reality than Tom actually does. And he doesn't think that Tom's adventures are fun anymore. He thinks actually they are very dangerous, and actually he thinks that Tom is reckless and is not willing to follow Tom and say always yes to him, especially when Sally McKay comes into their life. And this takes you to introduce a catalyst. You need a third element to force the old characters to react in a new ways. In my story, that's Sally McKay. Her quest for vengeance drives Tom and Huck into the wild and forces them to compete, moving them away from the St. Petersburg vibe and into the Legends of the West world. So her character moved them away from the original story, from the hometown, and she completely flipped their lives. And she involuntarily gonna cause a lot of conflict between the two guys I mentioned in my previous videos. Both of them fall for her because obviously she's a beautiful mysterious girl. You know, she's different from any other girl that they met before. She's totally different that, for example, Becky Thatcher, Tom Sawyer girlfriend in St. Petersburg. She is different, and she's not only beautiful, but she is a very attractive person that's gonna cause to create a lot of situation. So when you create a third element, and it's not necessarily has to be a girl or a guy, but it can be anything else. But you have to force the characters to leave their past and walk into your story. That is gonna change their dynamic. You're gonna bring contrast between the characters. That what it was in the past, and now is the present, and now they react in a different way because the consequences, the elements are different. And these are my tips to use an already existing character or historical characters, historical events that really happen, and reintroduce them into your own story. A final thought is what helped me a lot even is to read analyses about the adventure of Tom Sawyer and the adventure of Huckleberry Finn, listen different opinions about critics, and see what they were saying about the two characters to understand better their characteristics, and also read about Mark Twain life, his story, his real life story, to basically. So sometimes you really have to think through about using characters that already existed, that already been created by somebody else, because emerge into his own mind, into his own world. Because obviously I can't talk to him, I can ask any question to try to be as much faithful to the characters as possible. I don't want to really distort them. Using them into your own work is not always easy. A lot of people maybe think, oh, everything is already been created, I just have to put this character into my story, and that's so easy, I don't have to create nobody else. Well, it's not really like that. It's actually, in my opinion, it's way more difficult than create your own original characters. So there is a lot of work behind the scene. It's not just about drawing somebody else's character. It's way more than that. There is a lot of work, a lot of research. So if you want to keep these icon characters faithful as possible to the original work. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you find it useful. Maybe you can use these tips and idea to create your own story, and hopefully you're interested to watch this video here or here. I don't know what it's gonna show, but you're welcome to check my other videos. And don't forget, if you want to read Legends of the West, you can do it on my website, one.comics.com. And don't forget to subscribe, give a like, and leave a comment. It really helps my channel to grow, so the algorithm can show it to more people, my channel. You know, YouTube, it's a long process and it's getting very complicated, so give a like it, or if you don't, it's okay. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.